called tithing. And so that's the first thing I look at is tithing. And so now everything is based off of your gross pay. All right, so let's say your gross pay is $5,000 a month, but then, you know, you guys know how taxes work and all that stuff, and you might even have something else come out of there. But let's say your net pay is $4,500 a month, okay? So that's the difference between gross and net, is before and after taxes, okay? So if you do everything off of the gross, I remember asking my business mentor, and I'll give you his answer, but I asked him, so are you supposed to tithe? Are you supposed to give money off of the gross or the net? He said, well, do you want the blessings off the gross or the net? And I was like, gotcha. So I thought that was a good way to answer it. So I've been answering it that way ever since, okay? So your tithe, all right. Next priority is your emergency fund. You've got to get an emergency fund set up, you know, and you've heard Dave Ramsey talk about that. Getting $1,000 put away is a great place to start. Now, I wouldn't finish there, but that's a great place to start, okay? All right. Next up, you know, you're supposed to pay yourself first, and you've done that. So if you don't have this done, you want to get that done first, okay? Now, these next two you kind of want to do around the same time, and this is short-term savings, okay, and debt reduction. And again, Dave Ramsey is going to put debt reduction first, and the reason why is most of his audience doesn't have a business. Most of his audience has a job, and they're not doing anything on the side, and so they need to live below their means, and there's a very restrictive. Every book out there on finance is going to tell you to live below your means. So I do believe that, but we also believe as entrepreneurs that you're supposed to expand your means. Right. Okay, does that make sense? And so what I like to see people do is start saving some money, short-term savings, okay, and debt reduction at the same time. You can do that 50-50. A lot of that I do by feel with the person. I'm also talking to them about their risk tolerance. So let me ask you a question. If, let's say that you had $5,000 and you had $5,000 in debt. How many of you would feel better if you paid off the debt and you had no money? How many of you would feel better if you were out of debt that way? Okay? All right? How many of you would feel better if you had $5,000 there just in case and you were paying down this debt monthly? Okay, so that was 50-50. All right, so you can see the difference there. And so what I want to make sure is that we're not having a financial argument within the home. So I'm going to ask both the husband and the wife. And the problem is sometimes the husband's this way and the wife is that way. And so I want to come to some kind of agreement, because the last thing I want is for finances to split up a marriage or to cause tension in a marriage even, okay? And so I want them to agree on that. Now, my personal preference is I would rather have $5,000 and owe $5,000. Okay? Here's why. Is if you lose your job, you know, something happens, guess what? This $5,000, you could probably live for another 2 months on it. You can make your mortgage payment still, you can pay your car payment, and you can still eat for food. If you pay off this debt and both of these is zero and you lose your job, then who's going to let you borrow money when you're going to them and saying, I don't have a job, can I borrow money? Do you see what I'm saying? And now you're putting it on a credit card, which means you're right back into the debt that you were in before, except now you're going to get charged at 29% or 12% or whatever it is, but you're going to get charged at a lot higher rate than you would if you just owed this, because most of the time it's not, this $5,000 should not be at that high of a rate. Does that make sense to everybody? But again, this is where you gotta understand that finances are personal, and that's why they call it personal finance. You got to understand what causes you stress. Here's another good one. If you're looking at buying something and you're starting to pull out your wallet, which is harder for you to do, to hand somebody a credit card, knowing that you're going to have to face the credit card bill, or when you pull out the cash and now you have less cash in there? So how many of you it's harder to pay for something with a credit card? Let me see. Show of hands. Okay, a couple of you. How many of it's harder to pull out the cash and say goodbye to that? Okay. All right, so that proves Dave Ramsey's theory that for most people, if they can get rid of their credit cards and just pay cash, they're not going to spend as much. Okay. Plus, there's a limited amount in your wallet, whereas the card has a much higher limit, okay? And so that's why you want to really watch that. A couple other things. I don't like ATM machines. I don't like ATM machines. ATM machines are a tax on the people that don't have the discipline to manage their money, in my opinion. Because what happens is every time you go, sometimes there's fees, and I realize some of them waive the fees, but the problem is when you get cash out of an ATM, nobody can show me where the cash went in their budget later on. Okay? Whereas if you use a debit card, then the debit card will say Food Lion, the debit card will say Walmart or whatever, and you can track where every dime went. When you take cash out of an ATM, you can't track it. And ATM cash means you didn't plan. If you're using cash, if you're using Dave Ramsey program and you're doing all cash, then you've got it separated where this $100 is for groceries, this whatever. You know what the cash is being spent on. And when there's no more in that envelope, then you get no more groceries. Does that make sense? But ATM money is not like that. It's, I didn't have the cash. You go to the ATM, you buy the one thing with the $20 bill that costs $5, but anybody ever notice as soon as you break the 20, the whole 20 disappears somehow? It's like you only spent 5 of it, but the next 15 of it goes somewhere and nobody knows where, okay? And so you can't track it. So just a couple personal things that I've seen there, and again, especially if there's any kind of fees on it. All right, so next up, I want to see somebody start really building their long-term savings, okay? And when can you touch your long-term savings? Everybody say never. Never. All right, say it again. You didn't say it convincingly. Never, never. And I have conversations like this with people all the time, and they're like, okay, all right, never, never. Yeah, okay, so when really can I take? Never. At some point, this is going to be a very big number, and you're going to be able to touch the interest on it. You're going to be able to live on the interest because you've never touched this. See, as soon as you allow yourself to touch this, then there is no boundary. It's got to be never. The money that we have with our financial planner, when have we ever touched it? Never. Okay? And so that's just not going to happen. He's got some money that we can touch, but there's 2 accounts that have an enormous amount of money in it that we cannot touch. Okay? Now, the government is going to make me touch it at a certain point, because when you hit a certain age, they make you take money out and everything. Just one more way that they control you, okay? So understand that. So ideal situation is you want 10% going here every month, okay? Ideally, you would like to see 5% and 5%, and once this is funded, you're set, so it shouldn't take any percentage after that. And tithing, by definition, is 10%. You can offer above and beyond that, but that's it. So here's the number one problem people have. If they make $5,000 a month, how much do they think they make? $5,000 a month. And the problem is they don't, because they already lost $500 to taxes, which is what percentage? 10, okay? And it's actually probably closer to 15. So I just did that for round numbers. But now that's 10, 20, 30, 40%. So 40% of your $5,000 is spent before you get to buy a single grocery, pay anything else out. And so how much do you really make? $3,000. That's the other 60%. And see, when mentally you think you make $5,000, you think you can afford things. But when you understand that you should be budgeting on $3,000, that's the problem. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, for budgets, I'm not huge on budgets. And that might sound weird because I talk about it all the time. Budgets, and I think it was Gary that said it a little while back. He said most people, they look at a budget as it puts them in jail, and instead they should look at it as a shield of armor that they have that protects them from getting into trouble, okay? So the bottom line is, how much, once you've got money under control and you're living within this, do I really care how much you go out to eat or how much you do anything else? If you spend every dime of this $3,000, am I going to have any heartburn with it? No, why? Because all your priorities were already taken care of. This is your money to do whatever you want. And if some of you want to spend $2,800 of it on a house and and eat ramen noodles, that's fine. If some of you want to spend $200 a month in rent and have a $1,200 car payment, I don't care. That's up to you. That's fine because all your priorities are already met. You can spend every dime. And that's the freedom that comes with getting these into a habit, okay? Now, some of you thinking, well, wait a minute, but I'm on BMP, I'm on streaming, I'm on whatever. Well, guess what? For me, I consider that part of your long-term savings. Because isn't that your retirement program? Now, it may not be for you, but this was our retirement program. And I treated it serious. And there was a year that we didn't have the money, physically didn't have the money to invest in our IRA and buy all the tools we needed. Because we registered 23 different legs our first year, and we were supplying tools to all of them, getting that going. And it was an investment, okay? But when I was thinking about it, I'm like, okay, I can put the money into my mutual fund, and it'll help me ease the pain of retirement 40 years from now. Or I can put the money into my business and retire 2 to 5 years from now. And so that's what I did. So is that what you advise people to do? No. What? No, I don't. Why? Because I don't know if you're going to build it. And that's why only you can make that decision. But if you make that decision to put it in your business and not put it in retirement, then you better be real and not be stealing from your wife's retirement or stealing from your husband's. You better be real and actually do it because you're making a choice. You better make it happen, okay? And so that's the importance I put on that. So short-term savings, what is that for? That's putting some money in there every month so that when something comes up, let's say there's a leadership that comes up and you need some money. Let's say your family only gets together every couple years and they all decide they want to go to Disney together, that you got enough money, you can dip into this. See, this is larger. There should be more money in here. There should be, you want to get to at least 3 to 6 months of your expenses. So then if you lose your job, 3 to 6 months of your expenses. So if you do lose your job, now you're not just cushioned for a few weeks, you're cushioned for maybe 6 months. Does that make sense? Okay. But if nothing does happen and some big opportunity comes up, you have no problem dipping in here and spending $2,000 on a vacation or on something else because you've earned it. You've got to have, for those bigger things that you have to earn, you've got to have a place to keep that money, but it can't be in here because if you put it in here and then you reach in here, there's no limit to how much you can reach in and grab. It's like as soon as you grab one cookie, you like the taste of it and you grab another, and that's the people that put money into savings and take it out. They put money into savings and they take it out, and so years down the road they really don't have anything accumulated because they never put a boundary up that said never. So if you can put $50 into this every month, then do it. If it's $10, I don't care, but you need to have some kind of account that you start now that's your never touch money. I literally have set up an account for a godchild of us that I put in $10 a month, and there's $1,200 in there now. $10 a month for 10 years is $1,200. That's with no interest. Do you see what I'm saying? So you've got to have something that you can put away. Does this help anybody? Is this okay? Yes. All right. And if your budget is askew because of past decisions, if this is really throwing you off because of past decisions, then you've got some recovery time to come back from that, and that's where you need a coach and mentor like, okay, so how do that looks all nice. If I was starting over again, I would do that, but based on where I'm at now, what the heck do I do? Okay? Let your coach help you out. They're going to guide you, but you still got to pick your priorities because in the end, you're still responsible for how you manage your money. Did you?
So I just want to add a couple of things, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. So I think one of the other things that we find as we're coaching and mentoring people somewhere between month 2 and 3 in business, so that we're addressing this because being a business owner, there's a lot to adapt to and there's a lot to adopt. And so one of my questions would be, Kevin, so what I feel like what happens is there becomes a point where people don't compare apples to apples in business. And so most businesses, what is the investment capital on an average that someone's going to be investing in?
Thousands of dollars a month.
Thousands. So, okay. So compared to our investment, ours is a fraction. It's a fraction of what most businesses are.
Can I share
Sure.
a real live one? So today I was getting my hair cut, and a Korean lady, a lot of Koreans are business minded, started talking to them, and I was like, do you own the place? She said, no, she does. So I talked to her, but then I went and talked to the owner, right? And while she was cutting my hair, I asked her what her husband did. Her husband owns her own mechanic business. I said, oh, where does he work? He works from the house. I'm like, why does he do that? Well, because of the example that I gave you earlier, is he was tired of, the company charging $75 an hour and paying him $20, and so he works fewer hours and makes more money. He said he's not as busy as he was before, but he keeps more of the money. Isn't it how much you keep, not how much you make? If like for that hair salon, I bet it's $2,000 to $3,000 a month that they've got to pay, and that's what she was saying. She goes, look, you have no idea how many haircuts you got to do just to pay for the bills before anybody makes any money, even before you make a dime. I mean, here, if you can get your business to 1,500 PV, 2,500 PV, it's paying for itself, and that part of that paying for itself is it's paying for your groceries. So it's not just paying for itself to run; it's paying your groceries. So.
Okay, so your education in business is your tools, your BSM, your functions, right? Okay, so in a job, your education, right? So let me say it this way. So is this an investment in your business?
Yes.
But it's really first an investment in your mindset. So when you go to college for 4 years to get a job, when you're paying that college tuition, is that investment in your job? Potentially, right? But at the moment, is it? No, there's no return on that right away. Okay, so understand that in business, when we access BWW, we're not getting a return necessarily on this investment. We're getting the education that's going to allow us to have a return on our investment, okay? Now, so volume is our investment in our business, just like any other business that costs thousands of dollars. Ours doesn't, okay? It's not thousands of dollars, okay? It's depending on, whether you're 150 or 300, you're looking somewhere between $500 and $1,000, depending on what you're buying, okay? So when the budget is stretched, and you need to maybe someone needs to make an adjustment. So they're feeling that this is new, right? Because there's a product change. They're going to be buying some things maybe they were buying before, but then there's going to be something, right? So when that happens, are we comparing that issue, which is our personal volume? So these are consumer type issues, right? Do we compare that to a business? So that's what happens in this business. Okay, so someone's looking at their budget, and then the money that they're spending in their volume, they're not spending it. It's an investment in their asset. Okay, but when you're spending, if you own a McDonald's, do we look at that as spending? That's an investment in the business. But what happens is, because we're consumers in our own business, people start comparing apples to oranges. And you have to make sure that you understand is your volume is your investment in your asset. Okay? So it's an investment, and we get to dually use it. We actually get to consume it. Rather than if I was, putting $1,000 in McDonald's, I wouldn't be able to actually eat it and invest in my business at the same time. So we get to use it for both. But what happens is when people feel like it's a difference and it's maybe a little bit of a stretch, they're thinking like a consumer. Okay. So for me, I didn't question, okay, I need this, I need that. I'm a consumer in my business. I questioned, how can I get my points? How can I get those? That's what I was questioning, is how can the money that I have as a consumer, how can I get the most points for my dollar? Because that's my asset, is my points. All right, and so sometimes you might need to redirect some money, and that's why it's important that we budget with somebody, okay? Because what I also started to realize as a business owner is that my commitment to my volume was eventually going to lead to my conviction. And so, and your conviction comes from your consistency. So that's why if we have to adjust the budget to doing, so I would rather have somebody do 150 every month than 200 one month, 100 the other month. Do you know what I'm saying? Because now your conviction, we are trying to stabilize somebody's business and build from it, if that makes sense. So if we have to make a personal adjustment because of your money, that's fine, but understand that you can't look at it other than I am really trying to get to a point of stabilization, so I have a conviction, and the value is in how I can stabilize my points. So you don't look at it as, we look at it as because we actually get to consume them. But you can't emotionalize that as a business owner. That's just a side benefit as a consumer in our own business. But we are truly, we are marketers, okay? So for me, what I started to realize, okay, is we have so many points we're trying to get. And so my goal was, okay, what's my personal use? So let's say I was shooting for 300. Well, let's say I was 200 of it. I knew I could definitely use it in personal use. Well, then it was 100. I needed to make up another way. So that was where I started to invest in products so I could talk to customers. Now, I can remember every single week I would buy something new just so I could get comfortable with it. Even though it wasn't necessarily a priority for me, I wanted to make sure that I could market it. And I was marketing to two people groups, my customers and my marketers, which were my business owners, because everybody has different consuming habits. And so I was becoming not just a consumer in my own business or a customer of my own business, I was becoming a marketer. And that's what happens is sometimes people don't make the transition. They're just looking at, what do I need? Well, I have other business owners, I have other customers, and so I'm going to expand my volume in that way. And so we have to transition people from the initial, what can I just get from my own business, to how can I expand my points and compare apples to apples as opposed to apples to oranges, because most people that own McDonald's, they're not worried about just what they can consume and eat at McDonald's, right? They're looking to market to the rest of the world, all right? So we want to do both, and so, but we want to make sure that we are getting stability with somebody. So again, first month, second month, there's a lot going on because people have gotten registered. They're investing in their education, okay? Which we can't eat that right away. It's going to eventually funnel into here, but the first 3 months in business, there is a lot of things going on. So we want to make sure that we're reevaluating, helping somebody through that, answering questions, that type of thing. So I don't want to get into any more formal get started, right? Because Kevin and I talked about it. It's a little bit hard to teach some of this in a group setting because of some of the nuances that Mike said. Talked about last week. But this is what we're finding as we're doing people's assessments 2 and 3 months in business, is that they're just overwhelmed by just the investment all of a sudden. And so we need to help them just kind of compartmentalize what's going where and why it's important, and that long term, you know, any business is going to have a return if you make the right investment in the right places. And most businesses, the government gives you 5 years to even have a return because they understand it just takes that amount of time. And in this business, you're making money fairly quickly. It's granted, it's not a ton, but there's a return. And that in and of itself says something about our model. So anyway, that's all.